All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Mentor Monday. I'm so excited to have this opportunity to meet with you all on today. As you all know, Mentor Monday is our community that we use if you're looking to go to the next level in your life and career. It's basically a safe space for you to get your questions answered about how to make that next step. What does that next step look like for you, and to get unstuck or to get clarity on whatever it is that you're working on doing next. So I'm incredibly excited that we are gathered here today to have this discussion. We got some really great questions, so I'm looking forward to having this discussion with you all today. Like I said a little bit earlier, if you did not get a chance to submit a question ahead of time, you can go ahead and use the Q&A feature on this particular webinar just at the bottom of your screen, more than likely, and you can type it into the Q&A, or you can put it into the chat. Also, if I'm answering one of your questions live, or if you have a piggyback off of a question that's already answered, feel free to add additional context, and we'll be sure to cover everything as comprehensively as possible. And so without further ado, I'm incredibly excited to jump in, and I'm going to answer the questions kind of in the order that they came in. And so the first question we have today is from Val, and Val says, "You are absolutely amazing." Thank you, Val. Very nice of you. I recently took time off work with the hopes of not returning to fully commit to my business. I am networking, building relationships, doing research, and putting together fun courses. Great. I need the confidence to share the information that I have gained over the years on social media and my blog. I am very confident sharing in the classroom setting and one-on-one. How did you build up the confidence to get online consistently to share what you know? Val, I think this is this is a great question, and I'm gonna answer it a couple of different ways. One, just based off of what it looks like your situation is. You said you recently took off work, so it sounds like you transitioned into entrepreneurship, at least full time. It sounds like that might be the plan for you, and you want to fully commit that particular time to growing your business. Congratulations on making the leap. I know that's not an easy decision to come by. That takes a lot of courage, so congratulations. But now you're saying it's not so much that you don't have the confidence to share the information that you gain. Oh, no, I'm sorry. You're looking for the confidence to share the information that you've gained over the years on social media and your blog. And so actually, Val, I think I just saw your name pop up. We are answering your question right now, so great timing. One of the things I would say is, it sounds like you have the content that you need. You have the expertise. Right now, it seems like it's more of a discrepancy in terms of the results or the consistency that you're looking forward to. And let me open the chat. Give me a second. So you all can chat and see each other's questions. Okay. And thank you for that message, Val. Yes. Okay. So it looks like consistency is part of the problem. Now, what I will say in one short sentence is that consistency is what actually breeds confidence. So you doing the act of showing up online, you doing the act of actually sharing that information is what actually is going to breed confidence in your delivery. But what I will say, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, the chat is open. It sounds like there's a tinge of fear of rejection that's going on. So realistically, for instance, if you were to share something online and if it went wildly viral, or if it was really popular, you probably wouldn't be asking this question, right? Like, it probably wouldn't be ruminating in your head at the moment. But right now, it seems like there's some apprehensiveness in terms of sharing what you know, for fear that people aren't necessarily going to grasp onto the message. Or quite frankly, since you made the full-time leap into entrepreneurship, you might also have the fear that it's not actually going to convert to dollars, because at this point, I don't know how long your runway is, but realistically, you need to see that conversion if you're going to continue on. I hope that's okay. I see your yes. I hope that summary was at least accurate. So what I will say is really getting down to the root of, why do you feel that your message may not have the application or may not get well received in the way that you are looking for it to be well received. It could just be a systematic issue. Do you not feel like your messaging is clear? Do you not feel like you have clear services and products? Do you not feel like you're able to summarize in a concise format, the messages that you need to get across? I think there's a lot of different things that go along with degrading our confidence and sharing things online. But what I will say is, if you are looking to really show up online, that iteration and that experimentation to get to the crux of what resonates most with your message is what's going to be most helpful for you. You're saying, I'm nervous in front of the camera and how I will sound. Okay, that's interesting. So I think when we think about going online, we have very definite things in our mind, like, oh, we must be on camera, or we must do video, or we must say the most poignant thing in 60 seconds or less. What I will say, if you are nervous showing up on camera, if that's not your thing and you are in a position where you need to convert, right now we'll unpack that. But first off, I think a lot of the discrepancy is in your head. A lot of the fear is in your head, because more than likely you're saying that you connect one-on-one, right? You connect well in groups. So if those people like your message, somebody else is going to like your message. You're just changing up the medium. You're not changing up the content. You're not changing up the delivery. Your face is still your face. Your voice is still your voice. And so if you're already seeing that it's resonating in the things that you're doing, both privately as well as in the classroom, then really what we're doing is fearing something that's not even accurate in terms of going online. Because what's the difference of the people who's actually in your classroom versus the people who are online, except that those people haven't converted yet? And so one, I would just, in your head, strike down what's not true. It's not true that you don't resonate. It's not true that you can't convert, because you've already proven that you can. Using video is just another medium of doing that. But I will say, realistically, if that's your biggest roadblock, don't use video. Get nice photos, or just use the sound of your voice. People do sound bites all the time with, photos of just your sound doing the backdrop. If you prefer carousels, do carousels with images of tips where people can scroll through. Whatever is digestible. It doesn't necessarily have to be one modality. It can be so many different things. And while I am not a social media expert by any means, I don't want you to get hung up in feeling like, oh, well, I can't get in front of camera, so therefore I can't post. At this point, there's money being left on the table. Like, quite realistically, if you made the leap, you got to make the money too, right? And so if you're going to commit to making sure not only that you want to see the profits, but the impact, we need to prioritize the impact that you want to make. And so I don't know what you offer, and I'm not sure exactly who you talk to, but think of the stories. Think of the people who are missing out for what. Think of the people who are missing out on whatever message it is that's doing well in the classrooms that you're in, that's doing well in the private conversations that you're having, the one-on-one coaching. Those people also exist online. So how can we bridge that gap to make sure that they also get the solutions that they're dying to hear from you, right? In a way that you can do. Oh, you literally are life or death. You're doing CPR training. That's literally life or death. People actually need to hear that particular message, right? And so we want to make sure that we are not idolizing our fears, right? We want to make sure that we're prioritizing the impact that you need to make. You essentially are teaching people how to save lives. That's a message that resonates. I don't know about you, but that's a message that resonates, right? And so I think probably there's also an element of you not knowing, or maybe you not being super clear on maybe who you're talking to, right? Like, I think something with CPR training can be so broad that everyone probably needs it, right? So it's probably hard for you to niche down and say, like, this is who I want to talk to. And if that's the angst as well, okay, you're saying yes. If that's the angst as well, I would invite you to pick, like, who are you doing classes in front of right now? who are the people who really need to have this particular message, but they aren't necessarily getting that message, who right now has already communicated to you that they are a buyer of your service since you're already doing these one-on-one classes and everything. Go to the open doors. If there are natural open doors that are already working for you, don't reinvent the wheel. Keep going through those doors and keep pressing into those communities to further define like what your niche might be, so you can figure out, okay, these are the people. These are my people who I talk to. Okay, you're saying so good. So I'm hoping this is helpful. I'm hoping this is getting to what you are struggling with. But in terms of like even thinking about, okay, how do you package your message? If you're best in classes, right? Like if you feel strongest delivering classes, then think about the people who regularly need to staff instructors or need to have training workshops for classes, right? Could you possibly do a partnership with a segment or a region of YMCAs who need to train lifeguards? Could you partner with a company who needs to do a refresher course, or maybe even an entry level course for their employees, just in case something happens, just in case they need to be prepared? Do you need to go into schools where, perhaps something happens with a student, or teachers or educators need to know about CPR training? Whatever that looks like for you, pick, right? And after you pick, exhaust that particular network, exhaust that particular work stream, so that you can really hone in on, okay, these are my people, this is the demographic, this is who resonates, and this is actually who is going to do business with me as a buyer. I'm going to leave it there. I hope that's helpful. If you do have follow-up questions, you can go ahead and put it in the chat. But you're welcome. I think it's about, like, I don't want you to get stuck in your head, right? Like, you literally have a life or death issue. This isn't like, oh, try marketing. Like, you're literally like, this is how you save a life. This is what you need to know. And so because of that, because of the poignancy of your message, because of the urgency of your message, there is a natural demand for it. So I don't want you to get discouraged because you haven't necessarily seen the conversion of profits or whatever it is. It just might be that your systems need a little bit of tweaking, and so you can better hone in on that. But if you have something else, or if someone has a piggyback, go ahead and ask that in the chat. But I hope that was helpful for you, Val. Now, next we have Angela. Angela says, what do you do when you have reached a point career-wise where you don't like what you do, but the money is good, and you have tried everything from entrepreneurship, coaching, quitting, consulting, moving industries, roles, side hustles, all the things, etc. Seems like there are no more options but to stick it out until retirement and find joy only outside of the job. This is a good question. This is a really good question. Let me just pause and say, before I dive into this, what I'm hearing through the question is a sense of exhaustion. It sounds like you feel like you have been spinning on multiple wheels. You feel like you've been doing a lot of things, and it's not necessarily bringing you the fulfillment, it seems like, that you're looking for. And so you're saying that right now, because you feel like you've exhausted the options, that you should just that you may just need to stick it out until retirement and find joy outside of the job. What I will say to that is, when you reach retirement, what does that joy look like for you? And the reason why I say I want you to really think about that is because sometimes we idolize spaces or times in life, and we don't necessarily, and when we get there, we aren't necessarily able to get the actual fulfillment that we're looking for, mainly because it looks like, from all the things that you listed, we're looking for external solutions to a problem that may very well be more so internal. So I think that there's a need to unpack the statement a little bit more in terms of what you're really looking for, or what you're asking. So you're talking about finding joy. Okay, hold on, let me read your context. Joy looks like not working. For example, I quit working for 3 years and loved the freedom. And I imagine, and I know a little bit of context, so correct my memory if I'm wrong. I know you took a sabbatical and you loved it. You talked about it, you wrote about it, like that was your thing. You really enjoyed that sabbatical. But I imagine it came to an end because of financially. And I'm just going to look for your answer just before I go forward. Or just circumstances. Circumstances caused the sabbatical to have to end. Obviously, there are competing priorities. There are things that pop up in reference to why that sabbatical ended. But it sounds like, okay, both money and life caused the sabbatical to end. So what I would do is, as much as you can, depersonalize your emotions from what it is you're looking for. And let me explain. I think we can get to spaces where like we can idolize a job, we can idolize our business, we can idolize the idea of freedom, we can idolize our family, we can idolize our, retirement or these particular spaces. But all of those are still very much external. And so I think there's some layers in really defining what joy means to you internally, from like apart from what you're physically doing, apart from what you're physically laying your hands to or having to do. Not to say external things can't bring you joy, but external things are always going to be fleeting. And so I think it's a very like layered question. But the reason why I want you to depersonalize is because a lot of times people feel like, oh, if I don't have this passion, or if I'm not passionate about it, I shouldn't do it. Or if I don't like dream about it, or if it doesn't consume me, then it's not really my path. And what I will say, I think you have a very valid question. You're saying you don't like what you do, but the money is good. Your job, and you know this, and everyone knows this, your job is necessarily not going to always be the source of your fulfillment. That's not always going to be what's going to bring you joy. That's not always our end all be all. That doesn't mean you quit right away. That doesn't mean like, because everyone's in different spaces, that doesn't necessarily mean one thing or another, but understanding that that's not your source of fulfillment is necessary. But what I will say is, because I feel like there's a hint of exhaustion here, because you said you've tried entrepreneurship, coaching, quitting, consulting, like all those things. What I would do is not lump those together, but I would instead isolate them as much as possible, and defining what did you like and what didn't you like about each of those spaces. Depersonalize it as much as possible. So even in your sabbatical, what went really well for you? You said like the freedom of it, like you being able to probably set your schedule. Those are the things that you really liked. What you didn't like was that particular state of life did not allow you the financial solvency that you needed in order to take care of your life and career, or your life and expenses outside of that. That's a dislike, right? And so the financial aspect wasn't there for you. Same with your jobs, like in terms of entrepreneurship. What didn't you like about entrepreneurship? Did you not like the business development? Did you not like the marketing? Did you not like the back end accounting? Like, get as granular as possible, because then we can start piecing together a solution. So for instance, people think like, oh, if I go into entrepreneurship, I'm going to love it. That's not always true. I hate a lot of parts of entrepreneurship. I'm a full-time entrepreneur. There are a lot of parts I do not like. And in those parts, because I know I dislike them so much, that means I have to create capacity or team or hire out or staff out those aspects that I don't like because they won't get done by my hand. I'm not going to do it because I don't like doing it, right? And so being realistic about it. If you went to entrepreneurship as well, we also have The belief that you have to be the CEO. You don't have to be the CEO if you start a company. You can always hire a CEO and you can do the aspects of the business that you do like maybe you're a natural marketer, maybe you're a natural back end person or just the visionary. You can hire those capacities to do other things. In terms of your job, what aspects of your job did you really like? It looks like the financial stability of it you liked, but just not actually what you were doing. Out of the aspect of what you were doing, what don't you like about it and what do you like about it? And I think being able to craft a concrete granular list that's void of emotion gives you a very realistic perspective of what this I won't call it joy, but what could a fulfilling life look like in terms of your career, your finances, your endeavors, and start to create a picture of what that space of freedom actually looks like, not just okay, we're retired and we're done, right? Because even retirement funds run out. And so what allows you to piecemeal from what you don't like and what you do like a better picture of what that next step could look like. I see you say you like steady money and ease of work. So then anything that's not going to pay you what you want it to pay you, and anything that's going to be very strenuous or maybe outside of your natural giftings or your natural skill set gets an automatic pass. We aren't looking at any of those, right? And so what's going to allow you to have that steady money where you're not like having that anxiety? That's a real thing, right? Like you're not looking at your bills every single week. You're not having to ask like, did I make enough? Did I do whatever it is? You want that steady income, which could come from your career. It could come from business. It could come from a lot of means. The vehicle is varied for that particular one, but whatever one works for you is what you need to hone in for, where you like that steadiness, but also the ease of work. And because I know you're very or at least we've interacted. I know you're a very heart-centered person. You love giving, you love those particular aspects. And so I would get as clear as possible in what is it that you liked about these certain seasons? What is it that you didn't like about those certain seasons? And seeing what that next move could look like that allows you to prioritize or heighten the things that you do want to do, and what can you do right now to prepare for that particular space. Because the biggest I think regret would be getting to retirement and being like, man, I didn't even prepare for this. I didn't put the structures in place. I didn't put the things I needed to even actually enjoy myself during this particular space. I didn't put the parameters where I can actually enjoy that freedom or have that steady income or have that ease of work, right? And so I think a lot of times we get frustrated, especially when we do things that are very close to us, if things that we created, if it doesn't work exactly the way that we wanted it to work. But a lot of times they're just systems that might not have been put in place. They're levers that might need to be shifted for you to actually start seeing those results. That's actually going to allow you to better view what you're doing. But I will say, again, I don't want you to feel like you have to do a bunch of things or a bunch of these external things for an issue that might be internal. So really looking to what would be that sustainable joy for you, regardless of what you're doing, regardless of what it looks like, and then building from around that. And really, like, as much as possible, isolating the issue, because what you have is a lot of things. You've tried a lot of things. You put your hand in a lot of things. You made the leap multiple times, right? But I don't want you to compound and not actually see the root cause of what's happening or the root cause of what some angst might be. So I know that was a lot of things, but I hope that was helpful, Angela. If you need additional clarification, you go ahead and put it in the chat, or you can put it in the Q&A. But I want you, as much as possible, if I were to say, get a takeaway, get super clear on what you don't like about the state that you're in right now, and different states that were similar. Get super clear about what you did like about it, and then seeing how can we piece together a step or a next level step that's going to allow you to hit multiple spaces of that fulfillment, or at least create a transition plan to get you there. I hope that was helpful. But with that, and if anybody has a piggyback, you can go ahead as well. Okay, good. I'm glad it was helpful, Angela. Dr. Angela. She is a doctor. All right. Next, we have Jamie. Jamie says, my role has been shared in between two different departments. One in which I do a lot of day-to-day stuff, and the other involves more big picture strategic thinking. It's hard to shift this mindset on a regular basis. How can I find balance? This is a really interesting question, a really great question. And I don't think I've been asked something like this before in the context of Mentor Monday, but I think this is a reality for a lot of people, where you find that what you're doing requires very different parts of you, right? Like, and sometimes it's very frustrating to know what's expected of you, because in performance reviews or, you know, in conversations with management leaders, things of that nature, it's probably, you might be facing, and I might be projecting because I feel like I've been in this space before, but you might be facing the reality that whatever mind you need to have is going to be based on the mood of whoever needs it that particular day. So for instance, if your manager or your leader, your executive, whatever it is, if they are in a strategic mood, that's what you need to shift to. If they're in a tactical mood, that's what you need to shift to. And going back and forth makes it very hard for you to probably get a rhythm and a pattern of behavior that allows you to be most successful in either patterning, like, where do you want to go next in your career? What do you want next on the docket? Or you might even find yourself tipping in more in one scale than the other, right? So if you are a natural strategy leader, right, but they're really emphasizing the tactical parts of you, and that's not a natural gift, that causes irritation. Vice versa, if you're a tactician and people want you to be super strategic and you just feel like misaligned. So I think that's a great question in terms of like, how can you find balance? Without knowing, you know, the context of like where you work or the types of management, I'll try to answer as systematically as I think possible. But of course, if you have follow-ups, go ahead and put it in the chat. But what I found very helpful, especially when you have a role that requires very different parts of you, is one, time blocking. So for instance, if possible, within your particular role, if you can devote one day to just doing, you know, tasks that are more so strategic, maybe Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you say like, okay, those are the tasks that I'm going to focus on that are going to be more strategic. Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm going to focus on the things that are more tactical. If the days don't work for you, perhaps cutting the day in half, or perhaps doing different time blocks. However that configures for you, I think what that does is create a habit. It creates a status quo for you, so you have a baseline, so you're not feeling as if you're going back and forth, up and down, switching every which way without any context. I see your, give me a second. I see your comment. Give me more detail. I'm constantly divided between writing and task mastering, helping with big scale projects. Okay, Jamie, let me ask you one more question, and I'll summarize what you just said. Let me ask you one more question, which I think might be the crux of this. Is there an aspect that you like more than the other between the tactical and strategy? If you could just write that in the chat really quickly. But okay, for the group, for context, I won't say exactly, I'll try to keep it as anonymous as possible, but I won't say exactly, but this particular role requires her to split time between doing very large scale projects and things like writing, which is very different, like probably things that are more implementation versus more visioning. And you say, yes, you are a big picture type of lady. When I'm in the weeds, I get stuck in them. That's what I thought. So I'll answer the question the way I wanted to answer it in the first place. If there's an element you like, that's if there's an element of the job that you like more than the other. So for instance, you're saying you like big picture more than the weeds. Then what I will say, especially if it looks like that's where you want to move more of, in terms of how you structure your day, in terms of how you really devote time, as much as possible, I would devote time to your natural strength and really showcasing those strengths to whoever your team is, whatever your management is. And to be honest, long-term game, I would really look to seeing how much you can redefine your role. I think at all times there's going to be elements of your job you don't always have, but if you feel like you're kind of stuck, but there's also room for you to redefine or reframe what that role looks like, then it's almost like acting in the role that you actually want it to be, and then showing how things either didn't fall off or they're able to be reallocated so that you're able to almost seamlessly shift into the actual role that you want, which seems like the vision setting, the big picture setting, rather than the tactical work. Something that's very highly effective, and I see that industry you're in, something that's also very highly effective is showing how your time is better spent doing things that you're best at. So if people start seeing a cost to you doing something that is a little bit more tactical in nature, and you don't, and you know you're not as good at it, or you know maybe somebody else would do it a lot better, or there's some other restructuring that could happen that could allow them to do that better, be very honest about that cost. I would really lay it out, almost making a business case for this is why I feel like this role should have a lot more focus in terms of the big picture, so that they don't just, sometimes we get assigned things out of habit and not necessarily because they make sense right now. And so in the industry that you're in right now, in the position that you're in right now, in the role that you're in right now, why does it behoove the people who are leading your team to pay more attention to your skills as a strategist rather than someone who's as a tactician? Now, in the in-between, tactically, like as you're building that case, I would say as much as possible to keep your sanity, time block, and seeing like how can things either be shared or how can you just leverage tools. Like for instance, if it is something that can be done with, I know sometimes like I was in a role like this, and there were some tactical things, and I'm not a tactician, that I could automate, right? Like I did research on the back end where, like, for instance, if I needed to run reports in Excel, or if I needed to do dashboards, if I needed to do whatever it is, I devoted time to figuring out a system where at the press of a button, I could get all the stuff that I didn't want to get done. So I could get it off my plate and I could actually focus and thrive in what I actually like to do. Now that may not work depending on the actual nature of what you're working on, but I will say in general, creating a system that allows you to shift time, that allows you to create time to shine in the way that you want to shine, is really going to be very helpful. And so I would say time blocking tactically, but long-term solution, especially since this conversation, this community is about that next level, I would say let's get strategic about making sure that we build a case for why the role that you're in, or maybe even, you getting promoted to a role that allows you to be more strategic in nature, is what's going to be best for the organization, and demonstrating that in your daily work, demonstrating that in, your performance reviews. What are you going to say at year end that's going to prompt them to say, wait a second, she needs to be spending more time here. Like she does way better here. And giving yourself or taking opportunities that allows you to demonstrate the strength of that more and more and more. So you are now in charge of that narrative, being very vocal about it as well. I think sometimes we get stuck in roles because we don't necessarily say like, hey, I don't necessarily want to do this, or does this make sense right now? Or, I know this is a goal of the team. How can we work together to make sure this goal still gets met while also allowing me to be very beneficial, in this other particular space? There's a lot of different ways that you can word it, but I'm more concerned about your long term, right? Like what's going to come next. And it sounds like you're either primed for a promotion, at least, in what you're doing, or you're primed for at least a reframe of a position. So I want to put my focus on doing that and allowing you to be able to showcase what you say that you are most naturally strong in. And so I think that should be the focus, rather than like, figuring out what to do in the next hour. How do we present a case so that the people making the decision, whoever that is for you, is able to see you in the light that you want to be seen? I hope that's helpful, Jamie. If you have any other okay. Let me see what you said. Okay, you tried time blocking and loved it, so I should seriously consider bringing it back for your routine. Great. And having a deep convo with leadership about reevaluating and reallocating some of my duties so it doesn't feel like two. Yes, awesome. Yay, I'm glad it was helpful. Yes, being very clear about what it is that you want. Don't assume people know. Don't assume that they're thinking about you either, because, you know, everyone is busy and people are fairly selfish, right? And so you being the squeaky wheel in a way that you know it's going to actually move the organization forward, that's something you can control. So being very tactical, you know, especially year end is coming up, right? Year end is coming up for everyone who's in a traditional 9-to-5. So be thinking about in the next, this is October, in the next 3 months, how are you going to position yourself for that next level position or those next level opportunities so that you're seen in that particular light that you want to be seen, especially going into 2024, because right now is when budgets are being determined. Right now is when performance evaluation conversations are really starting. Right now is when bonuses are being determined. All of that is happening right now. And so whoever is still in the traditional 9-to-5 space, I want you to keep that in mind, hold that dear, and get your strategy together for how do you make sure that you are well positioned for the top of 2024 for all of the decisions that are being made as of right now. You're welcome. I'm glad that was helpful, Jamie. All right. Dr. Angela, I saw your question. I'm going to go back to it. And I'm going to answer this one, this next one really quickly, because it's going to be, I want to unpack what you said a little bit more. But I did see a couple of other people trickle in. If you do have questions, if you weren't able to submit them, you can still submit them in the Q&A, or what you can do is send like a private Q&A message and I'll be sure to get to it. I hope this is helpful for everyone. And if you want to, you can go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. I didn't necessarily tell you all to do that, but go ahead and introduce yourself, say hi, say where you're joining in from if you so choose. But next we have a question from Renita. Renita says, I have the opportunity to write a chapter in a book. How would you leverage this opportunity? I think this was a good batch of questions, because I don't think we've answered this one either. But great question. You have the opportunity to write a chapter in a book. How would you leverage this opportunity? So it sounds like it's going to be an anthology of sorts, maybe something that's research-based, where there's, for anyone who is unfamiliar with the question or unfamiliar with the ask, I'll give a little bit of context. Sometimes there are projects, books, textbooks, whatever it is, where there's a collection of different authors who come together to write on a particular topic. They either write, you know, from their space of expertise, they either write, you know, from their space of solutions, whatever it is. It's a collective group that comes together to write a resource that's then marketed or that's then sold to a particular demographic, a particular audience. Now, you have been presented with the opportunity to write a chapter. How would you leverage this opportunity? First things first, what I would be very clear on is, what do you actually want to get out of the project, and what are the benefits being offered to you right now? And so just from a profit standpoint, just from a business standpoint, right? Like, are you, is there a profit sharing model, right? Like, do you get any of the proceeds in terms of the income? That's one thing. What's the time commitment? Is there a page limit? Is there, you know, some sort of parameters around what you can write or how you can write it? And do those parameters align with what you actually want to be known for in industry, and or at how it goes forward? Do you have to be heavily involved in the marketing? If so, are you a natural marketer? Like, do you have business development goals with it? Are they requiring you to post a certain amount? Are they requiring you to do certain interviews? Like, what are all those parameters around it? And are you that person who can commit to that particular thing? In terms of exposure level, this is where I want to harp on more than anything. I think sometimes these projects can be really great because collectively they allow for a lot more exposure, or exposure to audiences that you might not currently have. There's also a segment, and I don't think this applies to this person, but in general, because I see this a lot. There's also a segment of people who don't understand their true value, and other people see it before you do. And so they want your perspective, they want your information, but really your brand collateral is a lot stronger than theirs. And so they're kind of using you as a one-up sometimes, not all the time, sometimes. Just be wary of that. Just pay attention to that. That's all I'll say about that particular one. But yes, okay. But in general, I would be very clear on what do you want out of it? Are you looking for exposure? Are you looking to get an author credit? Will your name be credited? Will you be listed as an author? If someone searched you, will this show up? Or does the person assembling the anthology get all of the credit? Do you have rights over if you're submitting something that's proprietary in nature, in terms of like, if you're submitting a solution or a methodology, is that solution still yours? Or are you now exchanging anything that's proprietary and it's now the owner of the person who's assembling it? So I would just be clear about, what do you want from the exposure? What do you want in terms of your rates and compensation? What do you want to get out of it in terms of maybe getting access to different areas? What do you want in terms of networking opportunities, speaker opportunities? Like, what do you actually get out of it? That will determine how you can leverage it. So your question was about leverage. How do you leverage it? If you're clear about all of that ahead of time, that gives you a blueprint of what you need to be negotiating, right? So for instance, a lot of people do these things for exposure. If it is exposure, right? Are you going to be invited to maybe do a live chat with them? Are you going to be able to be the one who talks about your chapter or the aspect of your content? Are you able to then market it to maybe your own community in a way that you are still tied to the ownership of it? Or is it so many people that like you're kind of just aligned in the book? If you want to leverage it in terms of like just getting an author credit, right? Like, are you making sure that your name is on the title, right? Like, is it not just going to say like the collected works of XYZ? Is your name actually on the title? Is it searchable? Can they find you? And so all in all, I would say get super clear on what you want out of it. And then from that, use that as the blueprint to leverage. Something I also want to say about this particular aspect, only because I've seen things that have gone super well in terms of works like this. And I've also seen things that look really bad. Make sure quality control is there. And so do you all have, if it's a print book, right? Like, do you have graphic designers in place? Do you have people who've actually done a book before, who are working on the project to get things together? Where's the distribution going to be? How easy is it for you to get your hands on? Sometimes people are just like, oh, we want to do this collective works. And you look at it and nobody's going to buy that thing. It's just not good, right? And you don't want your name attached to something that's low in quality. You don't want to be the best thing in a sea of people who are horrible. Like that lowers your own brand quality. You know what I mean? So I hope that was helpful. At least in giving you things to think about if you are going to take on a project like that, or if you're going to take on a group like kind of collected author opportunity. I think they're great opportunities when there's thought in it, when people are honest about, you know, all aspects of it. But just I also think in different industries in general, sometimes flattery goes a long way. And so because we get flattered that we were asked, we forget to negotiate. We forget to be very strategic about what is my name being attached to. And so, something else I should say, be sure you know all the authors that are going to be in the particular work. You might have a great suite of authors and you might have one who you don't agree with, or it's not a good fit. Let that be the filter, right? Like, so don't just say like, oh yeah, I'm going to do it, and don't require any information. Whoever is running it, whoever is kind of the collector, they should have this information, or they should have at least thought about it. And so they should be able to provide it to you in terms of the information, because we don't want your brand credibility to go down. We only want this to heighten it. So we have to do due diligence to know what to ask, to know what we're owed, and know what's going to actually be a leverage as opposed to a hindrance in the long run. But I hope that's helpful. I saw another question come up, and it says, let's see, Sharon, I'm sorry if I got your name wrong. I am a mid-level advocate working in a small team at an asset management firm and wondering how to develop more strategic thinking. That's a good question. I tend to do the task at hand and everyone is happy enough with that. Not sure if I am in a hurry or should I be pushing to be involved in more strategic work. I feel very unskilled in the area. Here's what I'll say. I think the sheer fact that you're asking about this means that you're probably a little bit more confident than you think you are. And it also means that internally, even if you're not completely a master at the topic, you feel that you would be better aligned with something that's more strategic. The reason why I know this is because people who aren't strategic don't ask this question, right? So if you were fine with just doing the task at hand, it would not even occur to you to ask this question. This would not roll off your tongue. You would be fully content. The fact that you asked the question shows that there's some gap, right? There's some gap in terms of where you think you could be potentially, either now or in the future, and where you are right now. So here's what I'll say. I know that something like, so you work in asset management. I know that that's a very hierarchical structure, right? Like there are certain things you have to do or that must get done depending on your level, depending on your role's responsibility. It's a very, very rigid structure. I understand that. But it looks like you want to know how to just get better at thinking strategically. And so what I'll say about that is, there are two things that you can do, both on the job and off the job, right? Like on the job, I would not overthink it and put myself in positions that allowed me to be more strategic in nature. And so if there are conversations that are happening, if there are group meetings, if there are team meetings, and I don't know how your level or how senior you are, but at whatever level you're at, if there are very clear opportunities where you see strategy happening, where you see people making decisions, where you hear conversations that you want to be a part of, if you are at the point where it's like, you want to develop the skill a little bit more, it might be a series of questions that you start asking. Like, how did someone reach a particular conclusion? Why do they think what they think? Have they seen it before? How did they get to the point where they were able to build this strategy or build out this opportunity, whatever it is? If you're more so in the, okay, I want to ask questions to get their reasoning, if you're really in the development phase. But I also say, I'm sure you have ideas, right? I'm sure you, at least from your purview, whatever perspective that you are in, see things that other people can't always see because of their position. So I want you to also challenge yourself to start inserting your strategy, start inserting your thoughts, start inserting your initiative, and just letting it stand as it is. You are allowed to have an opinion. You are expected to have an opinion. And you don't want people to just see you as the task taker, because that's not what you are. The fact that you asked that question shows that you are not that. And so reframe that image. And even if it's something that's tactical in nature, for instance, maybe it's notes, or maybe they've asked you to do ABC, do ABC plus D, right? Like, so even if it's just a report or a progress of something, give your opinion about the report or give your recommendation. Start infusing your higher level thought so that the vision starts shifting of who you are. I'm going to give you an example. I was in a role where I was the most junior on the team, but it was a very high level role, a very high level organization. I was in a room literally with executives, and I was the only non-executive. They were doing this big rollout of this wonderful app that all of the employees in the organization were supposed to use. And they were very far along, very far along in the planning of this particular app. They were maybe 2 months away from launching, and they were talking about really at this stuff, just like the aesthetics of it and how they were going to market it, how they were going to talk about it. Now, this was my first time in this particular meeting, and I was listening to them, and they were talking about the functionality of the app and what it would do and what it would enable and all of these things. Now, one of the executives was saying, like, all they have to do is download it on their work phone and it syncs up with everything, all of those things. Now, remind you, I was the most junior in the room. You have a room full of executives. And so what I realized the second they said that was they were wrong. They did not fully think this out. And so the question I did ask, just to clarify, because I didn't want to upend a whole room of executives, right? Like, these people have been in business way longer than me at that time. But I asked them, I said, you said that everyone just needs to download the app on their phone. At what level do you get a phone at this organization? Because I was sitting there and I knew I didn't have a work phone. I knew my peers didn't have work phones, and I knew no one below me had a work phone. And so nonchalantly, they said, at the director level and above. And so what happened was they forgot that unless you actually are issued a company phone, you can't download the app. And half their population didn't have a company phone. But everyone in that room didn't see it as an issue because they all had company phones. They were all at the level where they got it, right? But without that perspective in that room at that point, they would have pressed go on something that they would have had to roll up. It would have been more costly to have to pull back everything because they forgot literally 50% of their population because of a purview they no longer had. They didn't have to deal with life without a work phone anymore because they had it, right? But we didn't. But no one else was in the room to give that perspective. So the reason why I use that example is because even if it seems small, even if it seems like, oh no, they probably figured it out, they probably didn't, right? And so just make sure you aren't dismissing your thoughts. Don't take yourself out of the conversation just because of your level or just because of how they see you right now. You have the power to reframe that. If you don't want to be seen as that, reframe it. When I said that particular statement, was everyone happy? No, but I was right? Like, and they had to make the change. Wasn't my fault. They forgot it, right? And the people who weren't threatened by it lauded it, and they were fine. And I was, life went on. But I want you to, oh, good, you find it helpful. I'm glad. I'm not just rambling. I want you to know the power of what you have to say and the power of the perspective that you're at right now. So I don't know if you're super junior. I don't know if you're you might not be super senior, but I don't know where you fall in the spectrum. But whatever purview you have, there's power in that, and it's needed. That voice is needed. So don't take your voice out. Go ahead and put it in there. I'm glad that was helpful. I know I said I was going to go back to, now I have to find it. Dr. Angela, I know I said I was going to go back to your question, so I'm going to go back to your question. If anyone else has final questions as well, you can go ahead and put it in the Q&A or you can put it in the chat, but I'll get to this one. Okay, you said based off of our conversation, so as a refresher, this was figuring out the next step. What does that joy step look like? So you were saying just doing a deep dive into your insight. I think it's the uncertainty and anxiety that comes with some of the work tasks that make me not like the work, or maybe imposter syndrome. Okay. So what I'll say, because I think it would take a little bit longer to really define, like, is this actually the thing? But if you're saying like you're experiencing, anxiety with the work task and the work in general, an uncertainty, I would say, what is the root of the uncertainty? Is there an actual gap in knowledge, or is it you feeling as if you're not the right person to solve the problem? So for instance, if there's an actual gap in knowledge, if your previous experience shows that you've made decisions and maybe it's a miss, or, you were wrong or whatever it is, then it quite frankly just might be a gap in knowledge. we can deal with the gap in knowledge, right? Like we can fill that with information. We can get more knowledge. We can figure out what needs to be studied to fill in the gap of knowledge. If it's you have a history of, you answering questions or you acting at work and it being fine, but in your head, you feel like, oh my gosh, they're going to find me out. They're going to uncover me. They're going to think I'm not smart. Then that's imposter syndrome. That's different than not having the knowledge, right? Like imposter syndrome is you feeling inferior you feeling inferior or fraudulent or being found out. And it doesn't necessarily have to do with that gap in knowledge. A gap in knowledge is different. I don't think you have a gap in knowledge. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I think I know you enough to know that's not it. I don't believe there's uncertainty based on a gap in knowledge. I think it's more so, okay, am I right for this particular, imposter syndrome. Am I right for this particular role? Fair question. I think, and I've said this before, also at a certain point in your life, and I know you're a doctor, right? Like you have the degrees, you have the experience. So if there's something in your head still telling you, okay, I'm not smart enough, I'm not worthy enough, I don't belong here, then that's an inner narrative that we need to rewrite. That's something that we need to now combat the lie with truth. And so what I would say as an exercise that's going to seem so tedious and so annoying, but I think would be very beneficial, is if something like that pops up in your head, if you're like, man, they're more technical than me, or they know more terms than me, or they know this. I want you to then combat every single one of those thoughts with something that's actually true. In the past, were they more technical than you? Yes or no? Like, get it clear on paper. What we need to do is get it out of your head and get it down on paper so you can know what is a lie and what is true, and more so see a case for yourself in terms of the truth and the worth that is actually happening versus what you're thinking. Because the more it stays trapped in your head, the more you're going to ruminate, and you're going to be more prone to believe the negative narrative, because that's what we see. We see all our mistakes, and we're the only ones who see all the mistakes. However, we don't always search for the successes. So I want you to search for the successes and search for the actual truth in what is a lie, what is telling you that you are not capable, not worthy of being that position that's actually causing this anxiety. Now, if this isn't exactly you, and I know I've talked about the murky middle before, but if you are not doubting your capability, right, but you're just more so doubting whether this is the right space for you, that's different. That's a question of calling. That's not a question of capability or capacity. That's a question of calling. That's a separate process, right? Then it's not so much, I'm not smart enough, I don't belong because of an inner narrative. This is, you know what? I don't belong because I think I'm supposed to be doing something else. That's a whole separate process. That's a different discovery process, but it's up to you to know the difference, right? Like I can't, you would have to tell me what you're feeling internally, because I can't like crack you open, but it's up to you to know the difference between, okay, I see. I think it's determining the right space and calling. That's not imposter syndrome. Okay. Let me be clear. So don't speak something over you that's not true. That's not imposter syndrome. You're not you're not doubting your capability. You're not doubting what you know. You're not doubting your knowledge. You're doubting where you are. That's a difference, right? And with that, courage, I think I talked about this maybe last week or something. When you're making that decision, from the murky middle, the currency that's needed is courage, not clarity. Okay? We want to know more times than not, what is the step that's going to be it? What's the band-aid? Like, what's going to be the next step that's going to bring all the clarity? And we want to know before we make that step. We have to trust that as you are making decisions in alignment with your internal values, with where you feel like you need to be putting your attention, with your internal goals. I know you have family goals, you have financial goals, you have personal goals, you have well-being goals. That's when we need to make courageous steps towards things that we feel, whether they make sense to other people or not, are going to be most in alignment with that calling. At this point, and I know a lot of us are at a point where there's a cost, right? Like there's an actual cost to making these decisions. That might mean less time with your family. That might mean, strapped resources sometimes. That might mean the cost might mean you staying at a job that you don't really like, but you taking that stability to allow you time to plan what you want to do. There's a lot of different costs, but the cost is going to be worth it if you keep going down this path. What I don't want you to do is get in a cycle of desperation where you're just making random decisions for enlightenment, or making random decisions and you don't exactly, and you're going out of lack, versus from a place of, I know this is what I feel like I need to do, and I'm going to trust that my steps will be, let me watch it. Well, my steps will be ordered, right? Like my steps are going to, I'm going to trust that my steps will align with the path that I know that I was born to be on. That's a very different process. I do work through that process and everything. Yes, order stuff. Okay, good. I was trying to, I try to watch myself, but that's what I've been thinking about, using my job as a bridge for now. That's definitely an option, Angela, but and I will say, like, there is a cost to that. So I don't want to diminish that. I understand you don't like what you're doing, right? Like you don't like what you're doing right now. And that takes a lot of strength to go to a place, or not even go, even if you're remote, right? But to show up, however you show up daily, doing something that you truly don't like. But if we understand that that is temporary, and it's allowing us time to plan for what that next step would be, that's allowing us time to mess up and get systems in place or get processes in place so we can get whatever freedom is needed, whatever that freedom looks like for you, then that's a cost well worth it. You aren't doing a disservice to yourself. You aren't betraying yourself. You aren't like doing all the things that we probably tell ourselves, like, oh, I'm selling out. No, that's a plan. That's an actual plan, right? Like you're taking time, you're putting a plan together, and you're using it as a bridge. What I would say, especially for anyone who's in a job they just don't like, but right now, you feel like you need to stay. Some people feel called to go. So I'm not saying one way or the other, but if you feel like you need to stay, what I would say is be exhaustive about how you can get every good thing out of this job. It could be as minuscule as they give me a gym credit, so I'm going to use this particular gym credit. But it also could be as grand as, you know what, this title allows me to meet these types of people. I'm going to need these types of people in order to launch my business, or in order to get my next job, or XYZ. So I'm going to make sure I'm maximizing that particular route. I'm going to make sure that, because this particular company might be in a trade association, I get a discount on this particular conference, and I can see more options. Like, I would be so exhausted, especially if you don't like your job, be so exhausted about how do you get every good thing out of the place that you're at right now, because I think that helps cement you a little bit in having some semblance, as so you don't get caught in the feeling like this is the death of me, like this is the end of me. There's a reason that you are there. You're giving yourself a reason to be there. You're giving yourself a strategy, a plan to make sure that you aren't allowing the bitterness or the anger of being in a space that you don't like to blind you from opportunities that could really help you. I've been in so many jobs that I didn't like, but I was intentional about knowing what the next step might be. It could be, let me make sure I get in good with someone who's going to write me a great recommendation. It could be, let me make sure I get in good with someone who can refer me, or who can sponsor me. It could even be like, I know at least some of you who are doing businesses and everything on the side, it could even be those are some of your test cases, right? Like a lot of people quit their job and then get hired as consultants on that current job, charging double than what their salary was, or even more than what their salary was, because of those relationships, because of those partnerships they were able to build. So if that's something that you're actually interested in, put it down on paper, be strategic about that, and saying like, you know what, I might leave, but I see a gap. Like maybe in your role, you don't like it, but you see a clear opportunity. And because of your purview right now, you also know what they're not doing, who makes the decision, and everything in between. Expose that, right? Use that as something that you can use if it aligns with what you want to do. If you were to start a business or something, write a business plan around their gap. You see it right now from a space that you'll never be able to see it again. Write a business plan around that gap and position yourself as a consultant to get hired. And you already know the budget. You already know all of the things. So I don't want to go down a rabbit hole of all the things that can happen, but when you are not when it's not a question of your capability, it's not a question of your content or knowledge or what your understanding is, and it's also not a question of who you are or your worthiness, and it's more so a question of your placement, then that's a different process. You're not crazy. More what I would say is it's definitely real, but it's also an invitation, right? People who don't pay attention to this invitation, they wait it out, right? Like they're like, okay, let me just resign and let me just do, or not resign physically, but let me just resign to the fact that this is never going to make sense and I'm just waiting for another time. That is not going to give you the freedom that you want. That's not going to give you the joy that you want. That's not going to give you the fulfillment that you want. That just means you're just biding your time, waiting for another space to be discontented, in my opinion. What I will say, if you're doubting the placement, that's an invitation to start asking yourself a different set of questions. That's a question about legacy. That's a question of impact. That's also a very realistic question about what do I need to do now to bridge that gap, right? It's not just on a hope and a dream. It's not just like, oh, it'll be honored if I make the leap. No, because you know what? If you leap into business and you don't tell anybody about it, if you don't market, you're not going to make money. Nobody cares how hopeful or dream like it is. You just aren't going to make money, right? Like, let's be honest. And so, like, what can we realistically do to set yourself up to be able to walk into whatever that next level might look like? Understanding it may not be super clear right now, but as you walk, the path will clear. And after you make the decision, that clarity is going to come to allow you to see, okay, what's the next natural step? What's the next natural step? What do I need to take next? I hope that was helpful. That was a super long answer to one question, but I hope that was helpful. I know that was kind of geared towards Dr. Angela, but it might have struck a chord with a couple of people. Oh, okay, I'm saying thank you. It helped multiple people. I appreciate that. I appreciate knowing that. But I will say, I know we're at 110. If there's any other questions, you all have really great questions. Go ahead and put it in the chat. But I hope this conversation was super helpful. I hope that even if you weren't the one asking the question, that you were able to get some tidbits from what other people were asking. You're able to understand a way and a path forward. The tricky thing about a community like this is that I don't always know everyone's background. I don't always, know like details about what's going on. And so giving very concrete answers can be a little bit difficult, but at least giving you a framework. That is my goal, is to give you a framework of how to start questioning, how to start thinking, and how to start really cobbling together the solution that's going to be best for you and uniquely fit for what you're actually about to step into. But I'm so excited about like the opportunities it seems that's ahead of you. I don't want you to get discouraged. I think this is a very personal journey. This can be a very personal process. And when things don't look the way we want it to look, it can feel isolating, because it also feels as if you're the only one who's not getting it to work, or you're the point of failure. That's what it feels like. You're the point of failure. And I want to invite you to a different level of thinking, that you are not the point of failure, that this is just the process that you're on, and your sheer presence here shows that you're on that discovery. You're asking the questions, you're asking the important things so that you can figure out, okay, what is it going to look like? There's so much iteration in this process. There's so many, like nobody talks about the billion no's before the big yes. Nobody talks about like the businesses that don't work, the jobs that you did hate, the jobs that you quit, the jobs that you did really well in. Like, I mean, everyone has this like now I'm rambling, but everyone has this very pretty picture of how everything looks. And it's not always super pretty, but it is always worth it. So I hope that at least seeing that other people are asking questions about very similar things is helpful to you. And so I don't see any other questions. Let me make sure I look at the Q&A and I didn't miss any. Yeah, I don't see any other questions, but I hope this was helpful. I look forward to touching base with all of you. And not next week, but the week after is when we're going to have another Mentor Monday. So be sure and ask your questions there. If you are interested and continue to work with me in a more in-depth level, I do have a few spaces still open for this month. In terms of private coaching, if you're looking for something of that nature, you can go ahead and send me an email. I'll put it in the chat. If you're interested in that. And also, I mentioned this before. Hold on, I put my email in the chat, so you are open to using that. But I'm going to stop the recording really quickly. Thank you for everyone who was watching the replay. If you're still on live, I do have one other thing to add. But I will talk to everyone who's watching the replay soon.